My best friend sabotaged my career to steal my success. What I uncovered about his deception and how I reclaimed my life. I've always been a hustle-hard kind of guy. My life in LA, as a freelance videographer, felt like a constant uphill climb. Chasing gigs, upgrading my equipment, trying to break through in a city that thrives on talent but overlooks those who can't sell themselves. It's a tough scene, but I thrive on it. I love the creative challenge, the energy, and the feeling of building something from nothing. For the first 2 years after I moved here, my best friend, Chris, was right there with me, sharing the wins and the setbacks. Chris and I met during film school. We bonded over all-nighters editing student films, shared ramen budgets, and dreamed of directing blockbuster movies. He's a naturally gifted screenwriter, with a knack for crafting compelling stories and an undeniable charisma. He's the kind of guy who can charm anyone, instantly connecting with people and making them feel like they've known him for years. I've always admired that about him, that effortless confidence, his ability to network and get his scripts read by the right people. When we both landed in Los Angeles after graduation, broke and ambitious, we promised to have each other's backs. "We'll conquer this town together, man," he declared, raising a lukewarm beer in our cramped apartment. And for a while, it felt like we were. We'd critique each other's scripts, share contacts, and celebrate every small victory, every paid gig, every positive review. The first real warning sign, though I didn't recognize it at the time, popped up about a year ago. I'd landed a high-profile project, shooting a promotional video for a buzzy new tech startup, Synapse Solutions. It was a huge opportunity, involving cutting-edge equipment, creative freedom, and a substantial paycheck. I was stoked, working day and night, obsessing over every shot, every edit. Chris was, of course, my biggest cheerleader. He'd ask for constant updates, offer feedback on my rough cuts, and even insisted on attending some of my client meetings to lend support and offer a fresh perspective. "Dude, let me just tweak those scenes a bit. You know, punch up the dialogue, tighten the pacing. I've got a knack for that stuff, really highlight your visual storytelling," he'd say, scrolling through my project files on my computer when I stepped away. He'd often make small suggestions, rearrange shots, or rephrase my explanations, always framing it as helpful advice. I appreciated his input, even when I felt a bit territorial about my creative vision. Then came the weird glitches. After a crucial client meeting where I'd presented my initial edit, Chris started talking about it with other contacts, but always with a subtle spin. "Mark's got great raw talent," he'd mention, "but the pacing really needed some help. You know how it is. Sometimes you need another storyteller to see the bigger picture." Or if I landed a follow-up shoot, he'd say, "He got lucky this time." They were really looking for a gritty, handheld style, which isn't exactly my thing. It felt like he was always positioning himself as the vital collaborator, the one who elevated my raw talent, diminishing my own achievements. The accidental equipment malfunctions began subtly. One afternoon, right before the deadline to deliver a final cut for Synapse Solutions, my editing software started crashing repeatedly. I'd saved it countless times, but somehow, the project file was corrupt beyond repair. Chris was the only one who'd had access to my computer that day, helping me troubleshoot a new color grading plugin. He was, naturally, mortified. "Man, I'm so sorry. I must have screwed something up. Let me see if I can find an older backup." His frantic attempts to fix it often resulted in further issues, or even stranger, the file reappearing later, with slight alterations, a scene rearranged, a new filter I didn't apply. This pattern persisted. A crucial client email confirming my payment schedule disappeared from my inbox. A detailed shot list I'd left on my desk was found with a few key instructions subtly rewritten in a handwriting that looked eerily similar to Chris's. He was always there, offering to help, offering to retrieve lost emails, his concern almost overwhelming. "Don't sweat it. Man, we'll figure this out," he'd say, his eyes full of sympathy, while my own sense of confidence and control seemed to erode with every incident. My online presence, usually a carefully curated portfolio of my best work, started to feel like it was being subtly stage-managed by someone else. Chris would tag me in his posts, often showcasing his writing projects, strategically tagging my clients or contacts in the captions, highlighting his connections in ways that unintentionally overshadowed my own work. When I'd land a major new gig, Chris's congratulations would be generic, but he'd follow up with a more personal, almost conspiratorial message. That's awesome you scored that, but don't forget who pushed you to reach out to them in the first place. We should celebrate our successes, the ones we build together. I started feeling a growing unease. Chris was my best friend, the guy I vented to about everything. But when I tried to express my anxieties about these small, unsettling incidents, he'd brush them aside. You're working too hard, Mark. You need a break. You're just seeing things that aren't there. His reassurance felt empty, more like a tactic to shut down my questions than to actually help. One evening, I was working late, trying to recover a corrupted edit. Chris texted me, saying he was nearby and wanted to drop off a pizza. I agreed, grateful for the gesture. When he arrived, he was unusually energetic, talking about a screenwriter he'd met, a potential lead for a new project, he claimed. You should definitely reach out to her, Mark. She's looking for your kind of visual style. I told her all about you, all the effects you use and how quick you are. He stayed for a bit, offered more help with my files, and then left. Later that night, after he was gone, I noticed a faint scratch on my external hard drive that wasn't there before. And then, a notification popped up on my phone from a file-sharing service I'd forgotten I'd used years ago, a notification about a recent download. My blood ran cold as I opened it. It was a folder containing my work for Synapse Solutions, all my footage, my edits, my client communication notes, uploaded just hours ago. The download source was masked, but the timing, right after Chris's visit, was impossible to ignore. The realization hit me with a force that stole my breath. Chris wasn't just my friend. He was my competitor, my saboteur, and maybe, just maybe, the reason my career felt like it was constantly teetering on the edge of success, only to be saved by his intervention. The beer I thought was half full was almost drained, and I was the one being left parched. Finding my Synapse Solutions files uploaded to that long-dormant file-sharing service felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was a violation. My creative process, my client notes, my footage, all of it cataloged and extracted, presumably to be dissected or used against me. The realization triggered a cold, calculating resolve. The guy I'd shared my dreams with, the friend who'd been my rock in this cutthroat city, was actively undermining me, and I needed to know why. I decided to play along, to keep Chris close while secretly gathering evidence. I couldn't afford a direct confrontation, not yet. I needed to understand the full extent of his actions and his motives. I began to meticulously document everything. I created a digital log, noting every instance of equipment malfunction, every odd suggestion from Chris, every client lead that fizzled out after he got involved. I screen captured emails, archived chat logs, and backed up all my project files on multiple encrypted drives. I even started using a hidden voice recorder during our conversations, something that made me feel deeply uncomfortable, but I knew I had to protect myself. Chris, meanwhile, intensified his efforts to be helpful, bordering on obsessive. He'd constantly text me about new equipment deals, offer to optimize my editing workflow, even volunteer to attend client meetings with me, claiming his people skills could seal the deal. I started to see his charisma as a weapon, a tool he used to manipulate situations and gain access to my world. His casual advice, the offhand remarks he made about knowing what clients really want, began to sound less like friendly insights and more like calculated attempts to steer my projects in a direction that benefited him. The client leads he offered were odd. They were often projects that were either way below my skill level or highly problematic, clients with terrible reputations, impossible deadlines, or non-existent budgets. When I turned them down, Chris would act disappointed, accusing me of being too picky or not hungry enough. The unspoken implication was that I was somehow squandering the opportunities he was so generously providing. Then came the incident with the camera lens. I had a high-end, specialized lens that was crucial for shooting the Synapse Solutions video, a lens that had cost me a small fortune. One morning, I found it missing from my camera bag. I tore apart my apartment, convinced I'd simply misplaced it. Chris appeared, offering to help me search. "You're probably just stressed, man," he said, casually rummaging through my gear. "Take a breath, we'll find it." After an hour of frantic searching, I found the lens, not in my apartment, but in Chris's camera bag, tucked away in a hidden compartment. He stammered an explanation, claiming he'd borrowed it to test out a new lighting rig and had simply forgotten to return it. The excuse sounded thin, rehearsed, and the fact that he hadn't mentioned it to me at all felt deeply unsettling. I took the lens back, saying nothing, but the incident amplified my suspicion. It wasn't just sabotage, it was a deliberate attempt to undermine my ability to do my work, to directly compromise my resources. I began to notice a pattern. Anytime I made progress on a project, anytime I landed a new client, anytime my career seemed to be gaining momentum, something would happen to derail me. And Chris would be there, offering his help, his support, his access. He'd always praise my raw talent, but follow it up with a subtle qualifier. You just need a little polish, a little guidance. You need someone to help you connect the dots. It was a masterful manipulation, designed to keep me doubting myself, keep me reliant on his assistance, and keep him close enough to continue his subtle sabotage. The pieces clicked into place when I received an anonymous message on my professional website, a simple line. Check your Synapse contract. I logged in, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. There it was, a notification that the contract terms had been unilaterally changed. A clause had been added, granting Synapse Solutions partial ownership of my footage and allowing them to use it in other promotional materials without further compensation or credit to me. It was a subtle change, buried deep in the legal jargon, but it essentially stripped me of the rights to my own creative work. I hadn't agreed to those terms. I'd reviewed the contract meticulously before signing. This was a deliberate alteration, likely made by someone with access to my account. The password, of course, was one I'd shared with Chris years ago for a separate platform. It had been foolish, a breach of basic security protocol, but I trusted him. Now, that trust was being used against me. The realization was a punch to the gut. It wasn't just stolen credit or missed opportunities. It was a systematic effort to control my work, to profit from my talent, and to leave me with nothing but the scraps. It was a calculated act of betrayal from someone I'd considered my brother. That night, I sat at my desk, surrounded by files, logs, and screenshots, the weight of it all pressing down on me. The guy who'd shared countless beers, celebrated every small victory, and promised to help me navigate the cutthroat world of LA was actively trying to destroy my career. The question wasn't just what was happening, but why. Why would Chris, my best friend, do this to me? Was it envy? Competition? A warped sense of entitlement? Or was there something else at play? Something even darker and more complex? The only way to find out was to confront him. But this time, I'd be armed with more than just suspicion. I'd have evidence, a digital arsenal to expose his deceit and reclaim what was rightfully mine. Update 1. The knowledge that Chris had altered my Synapse Solutions contract was a game changer. It wasn't just professional jealousy or opportunistic sabotage. It was a calculated attempt to financially exploit me, to strip me of the rights to my own creative work. The implications were staggering. He wasn't just stealing my spotlight. He was trying to steal my livelihood. Armed with this certainty, my response shifted from passive documentation to active investigation. I couldn't confront Chris directly without solidifying my evidence, and I needed to understand the full scope of his actions. I reached out to my friend, Sarah, a freelance paralegal, for guidance. I'd known her since high school, and she was a sharp, no-nonsense legal mind. I carefully explained the situation, showing her the altered contract, the timeline of suspicious events, and the growing pile of evidence I compiled. Sarah listened intently, her brow furrowed with concern. "Mark," she said, after reviewing everything, "this is serious. What Chris did with that contract, that's potentially fraud, copyright infringement, and a breach of computer security laws. You have a solid case, but you need to handle this carefully. Don't alert him to your investigation. Preserve all your data, and absolutely do not confront him without legal counsel present. You don't want to risk saying something that could be used against you." She recommended I contact an attorney specializing in intellectual property rights and digital forensics. I followed her advice, scheduling a consultation with a lawyer named Mr. Davies, a seasoned professional known for his expertise in protecting creative assets. Meanwhile, I began to scrutinize Chris's behavior with a new intensity. His calls became more frequent, his offers of help more insistent. He seemed to be everywhere, hovering around my projects, asking detailed questions, subtly pressuring me to share access to my accounts and resources. I responded with practiced cordiality, playing the role of the unsuspecting friend while secretly logging every interaction. I started using burner email accounts and encrypted messaging apps for all sensitive communications, ensuring that Chris couldn't intercept my plans or tamper with my evidence. I also decided to run a series of covert diagnostics on my computer and external hard drives, checking for malware, spyware, or any unauthorized access. What I found was chilling: a keylogger silently recording my keystrokes, and a remote access tool that allowed someone to control my computer from another location. The installation dates coincided with times when Chris had been alone with my equipment, helping me troubleshoot technical issues or optimize my system settings. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they created was darker and more disturbing than I'd imagined. Chris wasn't just a jealous competitor or a manipulative friend. He was actively engaging in criminal activity, using sophisticated tools to steal my work, sabotage my career, and potentially ruin my life. The consultation with Mr. Davies confirmed the severity of the situation. He reviewed my evidence, listened intently to my account, and then laid out the legal landscape. Mark, what you've shown me suggests multiple violations of federal and state law: copyright infringement, trade secret theft, computer fraud, and potentially even identity theft. We can pursue civil action against Mr. Chris, seeking damages for lost income, legal fees, and other expenses. We can also alert law enforcement about the potential criminal activity. He advised me to cease all communication with Chris immediately, document all previous interactions in as much detail as possible, and to allow him to handle the next steps. This is a delicate situation, Mark. Do not confront Chris on your own. He's clearly capable of sophisticated deception, and we need to protect you from further harm. Following Mr. Davies' counsel, I went silent. I stopped responding to Chris's texts, ignored his calls, and avoided him at industry events. I knew it would raise his suspicions, but I couldn't risk alerting him to the legal action I was preparing to take. The sudden silence seemed to unnerve him. He started sending increasingly frantic messages, claiming he was worried about me, asking if I was okay, suggesting we grab a drink to clear the air. I ignored them all, meticulously archiving every message, every attempt to contact me, as evidence of his persistent intrusion. The tension reached a breaking point one evening when I returned home to find my apartment ransacked. My computer was missing, my external hard drives were gone, and my carefully compiled files were nowhere to be found. The only sign of forced entry was a slightly jimmied lock on my back window, a detail that seemed almost theatrical. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that Chris was behind it. He'd escalated. He'd gone from subtle manipulation to outright theft, desperate to destroy the evidence I was compiling against him. This wasn't just about professional rivalry. It was personal. He was trying to erase me, to erase my work, to erase my very existence from the creative landscape we both inhabited. The realization filled me not with fear, but with a cold, unyielding determination. He'd crossed a line. He'd made it personal. And now, I was ready to fight back. Final update. The aftermath of the break-in was a whirlwind of legal consultations, police reports, and frantic data recovery efforts. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a crime scene, a stark reminder of Chris's ruthlessness. The stolen computer and hard drives were a major loss, but thankfully, I'd followed the advice of Sarah and Mr. Davies, backing up my most critical files to multiple encrypted cloud locations. The physical evidence was gone, but the digital record was intact. Mr. Davies moved quickly. He contacted law enforcement, presented my meticulously compiled evidence, and requested a search warrant for Chris's apartment and electronic devices. The police were initially skeptical, viewing it as a petty dispute between disgruntled freelancers, but the forensic analysis of my recovered files, the witness testimonies from Sarah and Leo, and the evidence of the keylogger and remote access tools on my computer swayed them. The search warrant was executed a week later. Chris was taken into custody, and his apartment was thoroughly searched. The police found my computer, the stolen hard drives, and a trove of other incriminating evidence: copies of my projects, client lists, financial documents, and chat logs detailing his efforts to undermine my career. Confronted with this overwhelming proof, Chris finally cracked. He confessed to everything: stealing my ideas, tampering with my equipment, altering the Synapse Solutions contract, and orchestrating the break-in to steal my files. His motive, he claimed, was a twisted mix of jealousy, insecurity, and a desperate desire to succeed. He felt that I was naturally more talented, more charismatic, more likely to achieve the success he craved, and that the only way he could level the playing field was to sabotage me. He saw my success as a threat, and he was willing to destroy our friendship and my career to eliminate that threat. The legal proceedings were complex and emotionally draining. Chris was charged with multiple counts of fraud, copyright infringement, computer tampering, and theft. I had to testify, relive the details of his betrayal, and face him in court, seeing the man who'd once been my closest friend reduced to a defendant, his face contorted with shame and regret. The civil lawsuit against Chris, seeking damages for lost income and legal fees, dragged on for months. The evidence was overwhelming, but Chris fought back, attempting to paint me as paranoid and unstable, claiming the accusations were fabricated and that he was simply trying to help me. The process was exhausting, but I refused to back down. I owed it to myself, to my career, and to all the other creatives who had been exploited and undermined by those they trusted. In the end, I won. Chris was found liable on all counts and ordered to pay a substantial settlement, covering my lost income, legal fees, and punitive damages. He was also barred from working in the creative industry for a period of 5 years. It was a victory, but a hollow one. The financial compensation couldn't erase the emotional scars, the lost opportunities, or the lingering sense of violation. The aftermath of the trial brought a strange mix of relief and isolation. Some colleagues expressed admiration for my resilience, while others kept their distance, perhaps wary of being associated with such a messy affair. The ease and camaraderie I'd once enjoyed in the industry were gone, replaced by a cautious professionalism. I felt like an outsider, the one who'd been betrayed, the one who couldn't fully trust anyone. It took time and a lot of self-reflection to process the betrayal. I found solace in my work, pouring my energy into new projects, honing my skills, and building a solid reputation based on integrity and transparency. I became fiercely protective of my intellectual property, using every tool and legal protection at my disposal to safeguard my creative output. I learned to trust my instincts, to recognize the warning signs of manipulation and deceit, and to prioritize genuine collaboration over superficial charm. I also learned the importance of building a strong support system outside of my professional sphere. I reconnected with old friends from high school, spent more time with my family, and focused on activities that brought me joy and fulfillment outside of the creative grind. I learned that my worth wasn't defined by my career achievements or my relationships with others, but by my own values, my own resilience, and my own capacity for growth. I never spoke to Chris again. He reached out a few times, sending apologetic emails, but I ignored them. There was nothing he could say to undo the damage he'd inflicted. The trust was broken beyond repair, and I saw no value in reliving the pain. Years have passed since the trial. My career has flourished, but the experience has left an indelible mark. I'm more guarded, more selective about whom I let into my inner circle, and more attuned to the subtle dynamics of power and manipulation. The idealism of my youth has been tempered by a hard-won understanding of the darker aspects of human ambition. Looking back, I recognize that Chris's actions, while deeply hurtful, were ultimately a reflection of his own insecurities and limitations. His desire to succeed, to be recognized, had warped into a destructive obsession that consumed him. I refuse to let his actions define me. I choose to focus on the lessons I've learned, the strength I've discovered, and the creative passion that continues to drive me forward. The best revenge, as they say, is living well. And that's exactly what I intend to do.